Добро вечер, ова е Клан дебата, јас сум Билјана Георгиевска, четврток, 20 јануари. Вечерва со мене гостин во студиото е представник на на делегацијата на Европската Унија во Скопје, господинот Штефен Худолин. Од него ќе дознаеме за прашања што ги слушаме со години. Европската Унија дава на располагање фондови за земјите од Западен Балкан за различни области, многу области, почнувајќи од владење на правото, преку земјоделство до екологијата. Но исто така со години слушаме дали институциите во земјава на централно или на локално ниво имаат капацитет да ги искористат во вистинска насока или едноставно извесен дел од тие европски фондови остануваат неискористени поради неподготвување на соодветни проекти, не аплицирање за соодветни проекти. Во врска со ова вечерва прашања ќе му поставам на господинот Худолин и ќе слушнеме како после десетина и повеќе години од користење на ИПА фондовите, дали сега нивната искористеност е поголема. Good evening, Mr. Hudolin. Thank you for coming in our studio.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be your guest at the TV Klan, and I'm happy to be here.
The package of ИПА-3 funds, European funds for the countries candidates for membership, was opened 2021, the last year, and it covers a period of 6 years to 2027. Can we start with this package? Are there any visible and already implemented smaller projects of this package?
Indeed, we have started our new financial framework of the ИПА instrument, the instrument for pre-accession assistance for the Western Balkan countries and also here for North Macedonia. And this follows the European Union's budget cycle of the 7 years, as you said, from 21 to 27, covering a 7-year period. And this requires always to have a new legislation in place. We will have a new regulation, an ИПА-3 regulation for this in place. And the first year was indeed adopted in December last year, so last month in 2021. So we have not yet started to contract any projects from there. But I'm very happy to say that we have, together with the national institutions, we have assured that North Macedonia was adopted a significant package of more than 90 million euros from the 2021 envelope, and that we will start to implement as soon as we can. As soon as we can means what is still missing is the contractual arrangements between the European Union and the countries, all of them, because we will need to finalize there is a so-called overarching framework agreement for the whole 7 years, which is the contractual relations between the country and the EU, and the underlying financing agreements from 21. So we hope that in the coming months we would finalize this paperwork, the administrative parts, and that we would start to sign contracts from this package. We have already advanced in preparing those contracts, and they were already selected on criteria which relate to relevance but also maturity. So we have selected programs that are ready to go, that will not require now a long preparatory phase, but can come into life as soon as we start to sign them.
Mr. Hudolin, ИПА-3 covers 5 wide areas like rule of law, environment, democracy, quality of life, and there are subtitles under these 5 big areas. Which areas are most popular or more popular according to the number of applications previously?
The ИПА-3 is, I think, and as I see it, a logical continuation of the earlier ИПАs. Whereas ИПА-1 was as the first assistance project in the ИПА world, tackling the pre-accession process, meaning supporting the reform processes of the countries on their path to European integration. So moving away from projects, classical projects, to buy things, to repair, to build, but to underpin the national reform processes according to their needs and as where the country wants to go, what are the country's policies. And as an instrument of co-financing. We are co-financing with the ИПА instrument the national policies and plans and the country's needs. And this is a logical continuation, but taking into account every cycle lessons learned. And the ИПА-3 is a continuation in this reform process, meaning that we will look into the fundamentals first. We will look into the democracy principles, rule of law, as well as administrative capacities, the public administration reform, and the economic branches. And when it comes to financing, I mean, by the nature of some of the sectors, you would see that infrastructure projects are obviously much more represented when it gets to the size of the funds, whereas others like human resources, social development, education and labor, maybe in funds less, but nevertheless are also very, very significantly represented in the budget. And we are all looking into a distribution that serves the integration process, but that also serves the logical sequencing of where is the country at current state of play? What can we do immediately? And if it requires a lot of preparatory time, we would rather want to see this in a later package and to address first things first. But it covers indeed all the sectors that are available with their different management modes, depending on what suits best.
After all these years, in general, can you say that you and your colleagues in Brussels are satisfied of how the funds are finally used in North Macedonia?
We have seen several evaluations confirming this. We are satisfied as it is, but also when reading up our reports that yearly come out on the countries and also on North Macedonia, there are several aspects where there is room for improvement, where we want to see things happening better and faster. Maybe to put it in a nutshell and summarizing it up, North Macedonia in particular, similar in several sectors, is good prepared when it gets to the legislative process. What we see a lot of obstacles and room for improvement is exactly the implementation of it, on getting things done, on how to translate all the legislation and legal framework that is now in place to translate it into action. And this is to make the real difference for the citizens and their follow-up.
Is this situation similar in all the Western Balkan countries? You have an experience from Serbia?
It is similar in several countries. I mean, there's always individual issues and country-specific needs, but when you look up the reports, I think in the entire area of the Western Balkans, there are also various similarities and several similar challenges.
And it depends on what is your definition? Is it mentality to speak more, talk more about the regulations, but to have difficulties in implementation?
No, I think it's a transitory process that every country has gone through, depending on the time of accession. But currently we are seeing a different global situation. Overall, we are seeing different challenges worldwide. So I would not see it as a specificity of the country. I mean, it's a very challenging process, but I would also, I mean, being now for several years in this business, I see it also as a very rewarding process, and where we can see what difference it makes for the citizens. And what I like to say when I'm asked what will happen when we join the European Union? Well, nothing will happen, because everything that needs to happen has to happen before.
Has to happen before.
And this is where the difference
is. People has to be prepared for that.
Indeed, and this is where things will change and have to change for the better, because when you implement the reform processes in whatever sector, if it's in the public administration reform, wherever it is, in applying transferring the standards vis-à-vis the European Union acquis and the legislation, this is where the differences are made, and this is where the citizens will then feel it, and ultimately the end goal with the European Union accession.
I've tried to find a positive example. Very small municipality in Macedonia. It's a municipality in eastern parts of the country, Zrnovci. It is a municipality with only 3,400 people, but they have made efforts during the past couple of years, and they have visible results in favor of the citizens. I will ask my colleagues to broadcast the first interview that we made this morning.
се потрудив да изготвам еден преглед на проекти кои што општина Зрновци има добиено или делумно или целосно финансиране од ЕУ фондови за период некаде околу 6 години, почнувајќи од 2015 година, па вака, значи имаме некаде користено 4 или 5 покрупни проекти. Ќе почнам од најстариот, значи општина Зрновци имаше успешно реализиран проект од фондовите за прекогранична соработка со Република Бугарија. Проектот е со наслов Валоризација на обновливи извори на енергија во пограничната област. Имено партнер општина ни беше општина Белица. Се работеше на валоризација на обновливи извори на енергија и во двете општини. Станува збор за така наречен МЕК проект во вкупна вредност од 94.500 евра. Вториот проект е општина Зрновци беше дел од оние 11 општини во Источен плански регион. Имплементатор на овој проект е Фондација за развој на локална заедница од Штип. Период на имплементација е 2015-2017. Вкупен буџет 79.456 евра, од кои од ЕУ се 67.000 евра. Третиот за нас најкрупен и најважен проект во тоа време е реконструкција на главен мост на регионален пат Зрновци-Кочани во општина Зрновци. Имено во 2016 година, сите знаеме, имаше огромни поплави кај нас и како резултат на таквите поплави, главниот мост што ја поврзува општина Зрновци со Кочани беше попуштен и забранет за употреба. Можете да се замислите каков проблем тоа за нас беше. И благодарение на овој проект, имено од ЕУ беа инкасирани вкупно 730.556 евра и мостот беше бутнат и возобновен како нов. Имплементатор беше јавното предпријатие за државни патишта. Понатаму исто така крупен проект кој што се состои од 3 подпроекти, исто финансирани од ЕУ фондовите, се така наречени МСИП или проект за поддршка на општинските услуги. Станува збор за период на имплементација 2017 година и како во рамките на овој проект беа имплементирани следливи проекти: асфалтирање на дел од улица Скопска и дел од улица Генерал Апостолски во село Зрновци. Понатаму потполно нова беше изградена детска градинка со која многу се гордееме, успешно работи и ден денес, и беше реализирана регулација на речното корито на река Зрновка во централното јадро на село Зрновци. Вкупен буџет на овие 3 проекта беше 383.071 евра, од кои 260.000 евра беа ЕУ фондови, а останатото учество на општината. И дополнителен проект, уште еден само, се извинувам, како успешен реализиран МСИП проект, бидејќи таков беше системот, ако успешно реализирате МСИП проект, тие ви даваат како дополнителни средства, како награда, и како резултат на успешно реализираните МСИП проекти, ние добивме уште 29.000 евра и набавивме комплет тракторска механизација за комуналното јавно предпријатие. Значи трактор, приколица, мулчер, даска за снег и разфрлувач за песок. Тие се така покрупните проекти во општина Зрновци. Па видите вака, ние немаме посебно оделение за подготовка и реализација на проекти. Ние сме мала општина, само 8 вработени сме. Меѓутоа успешно работиме со останатите колеги од финанси, од правната служба. Тука имаме одлична соработка и со Центарот за развој на Источен плански регион и останатите невладени организации кои што покриваат го и нашиот регион. Кога сте многу мали и немате собствен капацитет, морате да работите на креирање на партнерство, иначе нема друг начин. Не, обично ние бараме помош, бидејќи сме мала општина и не сме покриени со сите надлежности. Меѓутоа имаме соработка со сите општини. Имаме во минатото успешни проекти како партнерски организации општини со општината Чешиново Облешево. Имаме исто успешна реализација на проект со општината Виница.
Продолжуваме со емисијата Клан дебата. Гостин ни е представник од делегацијата на Европската Унија во Скопје, господинот Штефан Худолин, шеф за реализација на проекти. Mr. Hudolin, there are positive examples, obviously, of the local or central authorities who are enthusiastic to cooperate and to apply properly for bigger or smaller projects. Do you have any other examples like this one we had in the program?
Yes, I'm very, very glad to see such, especially small municipalities who, with enthusiasm and with their commitment, demonstrate actually how it can be done, and that it's not always necessary to have a big team of experts and enormous capacities in quantities to get things done and to apply for not only EU funds but also other donors, and we can see in those that are the successful ones always the same pattern. It's always the ones who can define what they want for their municipality, contrary to those who see a call and then start the thinking process on what can I spend the money on. At the end, we need to get into a mindset of where can I make the difference for the citizen? What is my reform process? What are my priorities in my municipalities? What do I need to do, regardless where the money comes from? And then afterwards, when, as the EU, as the biggest donor, if we are able to contribute to this in our co-financing attitude, even the better, because then the grant money can be used in an efficient manner. But only then we can really assure that we have sustainability and that it's not a one-off example of EU taxpayers' money being spent in the country with limited impact.
But unfortunately, there are different examples. The politicians usually, in the situation when North Macedonia has real problems to start properly the negotiation process, they're talking all the time about the need of Europeization at home, everyone in his own field. But as a citizen, I cannot say that I can clearly see improvement, for example, in Europeization of some of the central institutions, ministries, where the normal citizens usually go to do some work which is necessary for them. Neither in terms of communication, nor in terms of digitalization. What are the obstacles? Why some are dragging their legs in this process of Europeization at home?
Yeah. What you are mentioning, I think one doesn't exclude the other. Obviously, we are also very eager and we would like to see the negotiations being opened. But at the same time, this does not prevent us from doing other things, from doing the reform process in transforming the society, the administration, and to address all the needs in the country to continue on the European integration path, because everything is defined. Obviously, the opening up of negotiations would give us an additional boost, would give us an additional framework on where we operate, and I'm sure it would also lift the spirits of the citizens, but also of all the institutions. There is no doubt about that, and we all truly hope that we will see this soon happening. But nevertheless, behind the scenes, we can still do a lot. And as I said before, with the EU accession, there's a lot that can be done. You have mentioned as an example for the citizens' delivery, for example, of the public administration. What is the first contact vis-à-vis the public administration? And the European Union has significantly supported the public administration in its functioning, and the citizens' delivery is one part of it. But the proper functioning of public administration, which is the overarching spider web, if you like, for everything that is happening in a country, requires many aspects, from a proper planning process of the funds, the priorities, the monitoring of it, again the implementation, but also then afterwards the evaluation of what to do. And the service delivery for the citizen is one of it. And we have been working in trying to address the digitalization aspects, but you cannot provide the service to the citizens if in the background you have not done the interoperability of the systems in between the registers on how this works. And we have supported this process with EU funding significantly in preparing this, in coming to a national registry that is a one-stop shop. And this does not happen overnight. Admittedly, this is a very long process. And I've seen this also in other countries. You have mentioned that I was in Serbia before. I remember many years ago when we started with the e-Uprava. which was one of the, at the beginning was very, very difficult. And now with the, for example, in the vaccination process, the ИПА-3 is actually the one tool that is properly functioning
works.
and that is connecting everybody, and that is now used as the central registry for all the citizens. But I have seen also in the population some reluctance to the digitalization. So some part of the population still do like to do it, you know, in the old way, in the old-fashioned way, which is not only true for the administration. When I see my banking habits with my bank, it's kind of online, but when I go to the bank, I still need to sign many papers. So it's not only an administrative public administration problem, it's all overall.
And if you work with a bank, foreign bank, you will, I'm sure you will see that it's much easier to work with a bank or, in other country than here, or to work with, to pay taxes in other country than here. I mean, everything is very, the process of digitalization is very slow in comparison of the digitalization of other parts of the everyday life. So citizens are asking why, what is the reason. They are talking about the improvements with help of the EU with years. And it's still not visible, I'm sorry, but that's the reality.
Indeed, and this is also what we're witnessing, and this is also what one can read up in our reports, that this is not yet there, and this requires a lot of cooperation, interinstitutional cooperation. This is not only up to one ministry to do. This is everywhere. This is something horizontal that needs to be addressed, and where all the different resorts need to get together and have this. We have explained in what we call it's a screening process. It's an explanatory session that has happened 2 years ago, where for all the chapters that will be negotiated, there was an explanation on how we see the citizens' delivery, what needs to be done, and from there we will need to get to the closing of these chapters, to the full implementation. But there is a lot still necessary, but admittedly this is an extremely challenging process in every country, also in Western Europe and in my home country in Germany. You would be surprised how many things are not digitalized.
One of your colleagues, the previous colleague in EU delegation here, he was criticizing the public administration in Macedonia not being efficient in decision making, for not taking the responsibilities until there is no green light from the top, from the minister. And is this process practically on the same level, or there are improvements? Are there people who will make a decision in the ministries without asking for everything their minister?
Indeed, this is also a part of this public administration reform process. Service delivery to the citizen is one, and this human resources structures within the public administration is another aspect that is addressed and has to be addressed. But we are not there yet. It is still very much depending on hierarchical structures, on top-down decision-making. We are also supporting this process in what we call the managerial accountability. So decision-making processes need to be structured and delegated further down, but also then people are then responsibilized. In the public administration, this delivery of functions and the authorization of decisions needs to be properly documented, but then also followed up. It cannot be, it's less functioning and less efficient if everything is centered around the top hierarchical levels. This is of course not possible. And we are following this through with the public administration standards that apply, best practices that apply actually to all countries. And we are supporting this process as well. But we are not there yet, to be honest, and there is still further work needed in exactly this addressing and entitling people to make even decisions, but then also to follow it up properly when they are not doing it, when they're out of their remits, but when they're in their remits, that they do this then, and this still requires further attention.
Why the people why they need to ask their minister for everything? What do they say? Are they afraid of making decisions, or they are not sure how to do, or they are not well involved in the cooperation with the EU? What are their explanations usually?
I don't, in my opinion, I don't see this only applicable for the EU. I think it's an overall systematic problem. But this starts already well before on defining what is your job description. How does my job description look like? What is written in there? What am I entitled to? To whom am I reporting? What is my decision-making bubble? And for what do I need to approach somebody else? And we are already lacking this systematic definition of the job descriptions, and then following it through, meaning a competent and transparent job structure, organigrams, decision-making descriptions on who does what. And without this, for people it's very, very difficult, because if this is not clearly defined beforehand when you're for the job holder, for the employee, then one does not know where does he function. Of course, then people are naturally seeking the blessing from the boss, from the superior.
But this is problem really, it lasts with decades. Hopefully. The EU, one of the priorities of the European Union is climate changes, environment, and doing as more as possible to stop the climate changes and the repercussions, the consequences of it. Here on the Balkans, the politicians are talking all the time about environment, how clean we need to be, our, I don't know, air, clean waters and soil, but still there is a huge discrepancy in doing things in comparison with European member countries. You have, I mean, EU delegation has started a campaign, some kind of green agenda for the Balkans. How far are we in that process? What happened since the beginning of this campaign?
Indeed, the European Union has, well, identified or put an enormous significance on what we call the Green Deal, but it has to do with environment and with the changes that we are facing on our planet as mankind. And we need to switch our behavior. And Europe, and supported by the European Union, has the aim to be the first climate neutral continent by 2050, with all the actions that need to happen until then. Because we need to move away in our thinking of that we are now supporting the environment or that we can save our planet with projects. This will not happen. We need to revise our mindset. We need to change our lives on how we are doing everything, on how we drive, on how we live, what we eat, how we eat, from where it is. Everything, absolutely everything needs to change. This is not anymore about some affirmative actions on environmental, to clean the rivers, to clean the landfills. This will not be sufficient anymore. We need to change this completely. And this is why we have set up the campaign in North Macedonia, which has now just started, and it has a very long life cycle. It will run for a very, very long time, and it is different aspects and sequences, from awareness raising at the end ultimately to reward the best examples on what was done. It is a very challenging process for all of us and for every country. And it is true that the environmental impacts obviously do not know any borders. Now, when you see, for example, in Germany, we have around less than half of the energy production comes from renewables. The rest is still from fossil fuels and from others. This is even in the EU a very different step of advantages. So there is a lot of things that will need to be done along the way until we get there in different speeds. And in the region, we are seeing still a very worrying picture on the use of fossil fuels, on the lack of implementation or even planning of renewables. So there is a lot to be done, and the European Union stands ready to support the government in North Macedonia in their activities to change the picture.
The economic crisis doesn't work in this direction. obviously, the leaders are talking about environment, but in the same time, they are trying to, they get into a race to buy more coal or fossil fuels because of the high prices of gas and etc. It happens not only in the Balkans, even in the EU. France is talking about getting back the nuclear energy. How the economic crisis and environmental crisis will keep kind of a balance?
I think the energy crisis or economic crisis, as you say, exactly confirms the trouble we're in. Because everything that we have done has led now to this situation, that energy prices are skyrocketing, fossil fuel prices are skyrocketing. But everywhere where renewables have been planned properly, where renewables even partially are in place, this has helped to cut the costs for fossil fuels. And those are now in a much better situation and can address things differently. If we are now still in relying on energy production based on coal, we need to be aware, and we also need to move away from the economic aspects. But even the economic aspects, we need to be clear that they are heavily subsidized. So this is not something that is covered even by the costs. This is not possible because the countries need to chip in, which is at the end, again, taxpayers' money, in order to make this happen. Plus, we are seeing the environmental aspects that this has. And for illustration, in the Western Balkans, we are having 18 coal-fired power plants that are producing 2.5 times the sulfur dioxide of the 2.5 times more than the older coal power plants in the European Union, which are more than 220. So besides the economic aspects, we have the health threat that is imminent and that is very often forgotten. So we need to quickly to address things in a just transition, as we call it. We need to ensure the energy security, but at the same time, we need to step away and we need to see and be aware that there is no alternative towards the renewables. We need to move away from the volatility and the unreliability of fossil fuels.
To whom are you talking when you're speaking about the pollution in Skopje? I guess that you are worried about yourself and about your family living in one of the most polluted towns in the world from time to time, especially in the winter periods. Are you talking to the local authorities or the central authorities or the non-governmental organization, or just to ordinary people to be more aware where to start from to clean up at least one town in the country?
Again, it's everybody. It's everybody and everywhere. It's the citizen, it's the systems, it's the businesses with their production. It's absolutely everybody. It's not that you can pick somebody and say, you will be now in charge of the environment and you need to solve this. It's absolutely everybody. We are called on our duty in order to change things, everybody. And you cannot, the citizens alone cannot change this. It needs to go hand in hand together with the government, with the policymakers, with the ministries, in order to set up the systems. My children are also asking me, why don't we recycle here? Because I can't. I would like to recycle. So I'm the citizen, you are the citizen who wants to recycle, but you can't because the system is not in place. So it needs to go hand in hand, and the European Union is supporting this process. We are setting up and in preparing now the recycling centers to be set up, and there again we need the buy-in, we need the commitment of the municipalities to help us in this and to say, okay, I will commit that I will do this. Here will be a center, here will be the collection base, and that we start to get into this. But I have to admit that these processes are extremely slow. The link between the national and the local level could see a lot of improvements, and where we are ready with the funds, from the decision of having the funds until getting them on the ground and getting them implemented, especially for this very demanding projects on waste management, wastewater management, infrastructure. This is indeed still very challenging and takes a lot of time.
Are you worried now, when there are more political differences between central government and local government, that their cooperation could be even slower?
Political discrepancies are always a worrying factor. And coming back to what I said before, I think this can be easily overcome when a municipality and any entity plans what they want to do and how they want to thrive. What is their plan for growth? Now, one municipality can say, my priority is agriculture. The other says, I'm tourism. The third says, I have a good industry. And then they build on this and they work on this. And then, regardless of the political party being in place, then you have a plan that you will stick to. And with a depoliticized public administration where the public servant is based on merit and transparent recruitment systems and reward principles, then you have something that you can rely on also as a citizen, and then it's foreseeable. You know where it comes, and you're not always overthrown by different political wind. And this is where also the European Union is supporting all the entities and the municipalities in setting up their budgetary planning processes, their expenditure frameworks, on how to get there. And I think this is a crucial step. And we have witnessed in those municipalities that did undergo this procedure, afterwards the financing of their projects was the least problem, because everybody was keen in coming in and financing, not only donors but also businesses, foreign investments. If you have a reliable partner on the ground, a municipality, business will be happy to come here and to invest money. For business, the worst factor is unreliable environment.
After years and years of recommendation to depoliticization of administration, can you see some kind of results?
Again, referring back to our progress reports, there is still a lot of work to be done, and we are still in a challenging environment. The public administration and the politicization of the public administration is still existing, and we need to see more improvement in this. And this goes together again with the entire reform process of the public administration, of a merit-based system, of a proper retention policy. And it's not always the head count. I think the municipality example, where there is a very limited number of people, but whereas the number of people, the limited number of people, make the difference. So it's not always the vast number, the blown up administration that is necessary, but the proper functioning administration. And
we have one more example from municipality of Ohrid. I was told that not that they are successful in applying and implementation of projects, but that their team hasn't changed with years. Nevertheless, the top of the municipality has been politically changed. So we'll see a couple of minutes what they are using, how they are planning and how they are implementing their projects.
Во овој момент, штото го започнавме со имплементација на нашиот најнов проект Ohrid Go, кој што е од програмата EU for Municipalities во рамки на ИПА-3 програмата. И тоа е проект кој што започна да се реализира пред околу месец дена. Станува збор за грант од 716.000 евра, во кој што се предвидени поголем број на активности во однос на ставање на Ohrid, би рекол, на мапата на зелени градови, односно предвидено е активности со што би се намалиле пред се емисиите на јаглероден диоксид, како што е набавката и воведување на Smart City Bike System, значи околу 60 на електрични велосипеди ќе бидат набавени и поставени на повеќе локации, кои што ќе можат преку едноставна апликација да бидат користени, односно изнајмување. На тој начин сакаме, значи, да го намалиме притисокот врз претежно централното градско подрачје и да го стимулираме овој зелен начин на комуникација.
Ова сето некако оди во прилог и на развој на туризмот, ако не се лажам.
Да, во секој случај, значи, со ова се воведуваат и дополнителни содржини како дел од туристичката понуда на Ohrid, меѓутоа главната поента на овој проект е преку воведувањето и воспоставувањето на овој стартап центар, како што кажав, да се обидеме да направиме една технолошко развојна зона во овај дел, што идеја која што беше наидена на одобрување од страна на европската делегација во Скопје, односно еден принцип на работа и во европските земји, каде што поранешни вакви воени зони или касарни или објекти се адаптираат во модерни мултифункционални центри, така да покрај ова ние веќе е предвидено таму преместување, односно давање на простори на Младинскиот културен центар, а во процес сме и на апликација на останати проекти со што ќе бидат збогатени содржините, односно ќе се потрудиме покрај формирањето на стартап центарот, значи да направиме еден неформален едукативен центар во рамки на оваа касарна, значи со цел да пред се младите имаат место каде што ќе можат да ги представат своите идеи, да работат на нив, а од друга страна да се вршат обуки преку кои што веќе ќе произведуваме во Охрид готов профилиран кадар за потребите како на охридското стопанство, така и на она што се бара во нашата држава.
Очигледно вие имате солидно искуство и сте една од општините кои подобро умее да ги користи овие средства. Имате ли еден постојан тим или луѓето се менуваат како што се менуваат локалните власти?
За среќа тимот функционира постојано заедно. Успеавме да изградиме тим кој што пред се добро ја познава правната регулатива, бидејќи за имплементација на вакви проекти првенствено мора да ги познаваме правните регулативи и прак програмата на Европската Унија преку која што се имплементираат овие проекти, а се разбира и националната регулатива, значи се е прашање на посветеност на оваа работа, како значи самите си даваме себе си задачи во однос на тоа да ги пред се пак ќе речам научиме овие програми, а потоа што е уште побитно и нивна имплементација во пракса.
Се уште ја следите емисијата Клан дебата, зборуваме за начинот на кој се користат фондовите од Европската Унија за различни проекти и различни области, не само на централно, туку и на локално ниво. Видовме како општина Охрид успева да употреби европски, но и други фондови за да ја унапреди својата средина од различни аспекти, но и од аспект на екологија. Тоа е проектот што се очекува наскоро да биде заокружен низ градот, да кружат електрични велосипеди, наместо во летниот период луѓето да бидат комплетно заглавени со своите автомобили низ центарот на градот. Го продолжуваме разговорот со господинот Штефан Худолин, шеф за имплементација на овие проекти во Европската делегација во Скопје. Mr. Hudolin, that was also positive example from municipality of Ohrid, and the issue of environmental projects practically is also very necessary now after this corona pandemic, which changed the way of life, changed the way of education, the way of working hours, working from home, working from the offices. How the pandemic changed the things in EU, and in which way it will reflect to these countries of Western Balkans?
Yeah, I think the challenges are very similar. In the EU, we have been hit by the same effects as everywhere else. All the Western world has seen significant impact also on economic, but also on a health-related issue for the citizens. And we are still not done yet. We are still under the threat. We see the impact still of the pandemic in our everyday life. But for our work life, I think it has changed us, but given us also a tremendous opportunity that we may be able to organize our work life in a more flexible way, which also has some benefits when you just think, for example, for the office space that maybe can be liberated and compensating it for at least for partially work from home, and if organized properly. But it has created also a lot of troubles and challenges in the economic sphere, and the European Union has supported also North Macedonia significantly in providing help to businesses in the competitiveness sector. We have created immediately a support package after the pandemic hit in order exactly for these businesses. We also put in place a youth guarantee for people who lost their jobs, who were unemployed, in order to readdress, in order to get organized, to find a new occupation. So there's still a lot of things going on, but it's a changer of the entire work habits, I think, worldwide.
As a result of the corona crisis, are there more projects from municipalities or on central level for, let's say, developing of the domestic tourism, domestic traveling, domestic services for the people, because we are limited, we cannot travel abroad anymore like it was before, or the project still has to come, you don't have a clear picture?
I think it's not even because of the corona crisis, but already before. We have seen a lot of interest and an increase in interest to promote tourism in North Macedonia. And I'm here too short to assess this how it was before. But I think, and what I see, how the trends are in the tourism, North Macedonia is an excellent destination in order to serve the new tourism philosophy, because tourists want, domestic or foreign, want to spend their holidays in an active environment, to see cultural heritage, environmentally friendly. So there's a lot of aspects where I think North Macedonia is perfectly set up to serve those needs. But again, you cannot only focus on the tourism and at the same time neglecting environmental aspects, or that you focus on tourism and then overexploit your cultural heritage and endanger it even. So there's a lot of aspects that need to be taken into account in order to do this. But we will be happy to support tourism aspects in this, because we see this as also as an economic branch to promote in the country, domestic or foreign, for foreign tourists. And given the conditions that North Macedonia has to offer, and it's an enormously beautiful country with splendid people, so I think there's a lot of opportunity that can be used in this regard. But
when you travel in different directions in this country, and when you see piles of litter on the roads, by the roads, everywhere, what is your first thought? To whom to talk and what to say?
It is indeed a tragedy to see this beautiful country and with the garbage all over the place. But again, as mentioned before, I think it's for everybody. It's for the citizen as well as for the system. And even if the legislation is in place, we are still lacking the implementation of the legislation. And if a citizen, I've seen once in the Shar mountain where a small truck was throwing his construction site waste down the mountain wall. And this is of course extremely sad to see this, but as long as there is no inspection in place, as long as the municipality and the national administration is not taking this up in addressing this and following it up, it will be very difficult. So of course it's for the citizens and their awareness, but it's also up to the institutions to follow this up when citizens do things wrong. And it needs to go hand in hand. And this is the first message also when tourists come and when they see this, when you cross the border, it's a big factor. And this visualization is indeed has a deep effect. And again, we will be glad in supporting it, but it will not be sufficient to, for example, to close illegal landfills. We close illegal landfills, but afterwards it will again be there, because where do people put their waste? Because there is no, not only the practices, but you cannot, the system is not there. There is no recycling in place. So it needs to indeed go hand in hand, and it is for everybody to be responsible for the waste problem in the country.
You mentioned the borders. Macedonia is a very small country, and definitely it's very, very important to cooperate with the neighbors. We can see even now with the relations and the dispute with neighboring Bulgaria. Are there enough projects or interest for projects for cross-border cooperation funded by EU?
Yes, by nature there is a lot of interest, especially for the cross-border programs. And when we think about why cross-border cooperation programs with the member states were introduced, it's because of the specificity of the border regions, which are always very, very special areas, sometimes very remote, sometimes socially, economically underdeveloped, different cultural issues. And this was intended indeed to overcome this and to use this also as an opportunity, not only to address the needs and to put things better, but to foster exactly this good neighborly relations. And what is sometimes forgotten, in the European Union, you have very successful cross-border cooperation still ongoing, and very significantly. For example, between France and Germany, there are enormous CBC programs in place, cross-border corporations, that are really changing the lives of citizens living in this area. And we are seeing similarly here, but again, it will need to be more than buying things. Not to say, I will buy a garbage truck in my municipality, and in the other country in the municipality, they will always also buy a garbage truck. And then we'll do a training together, and then I have a project. No. Municipalities need to think through with their partner on how can we improve? How can we really make the difference for our citizens? How can we benefit from each other? And those municipalities who do this are always very, very successful in the absorption of the funds.
The EU has devoted practically the 2022 as a year for the young people, to help them to overcome all the challenges in terms of corona crisis, education, employment, etc. How will the young people from North Macedonia be included in the projects that EU is planning?
We are living in a very dynamic environment, and we are especially witnessing this in the education sector. And it poses for us an extremely challenging environment for all policymakers in education and in employment, because the current situation that we are having is that people who are leaving their education cannot find a job, because we have a mismatch of what is produced in knowledge compared to the market, what is needed. And many people who are now entering in school will work in jobs that today do not even exist. So it's very difficult to prepare those people for this. But we have enough models within the European Union, common practices, best practices, where we are also having a significant, very frequent exchange with all the countries, and including also with North Macedonia, on how to address this, on to change the education system in a way, not only for the EU funds, but for the whole life of the younger generation, in teaching the education perception that not what the people need from where they need to learn, not to prescribe the learning material, but to prescribe what at the end they need to know. And how to get there, this will be to the liberty of the education institution, of the country, to address these things. And this is a newer, modern way on how to change the education sector, because in our digitalized world, we cannot prescribe anymore from which book people need to learn, because this will change so fast, and it's so dynamic that we need to change this entire education system.
Yes, there is a lot to be done in practically all areas of cooperation. Thank you very much for being our guest in this program. Ја следевте емисијата Клан дебата со нашиот гостин, господинот Штефан Худолин од Европската делегација. Зборувавме за начините на кои се користат европските фондови за да го подобрат квалитетот на животот на граѓаните на земја кандидат како што е Северна Македонија, но и да ја подобрат, да ја подигнат свеста на луѓето дека европеизацијата зависи само од нас, нема да дојде од некаде од друга страна. Добра ноќ и пријатно.